Sean Dustin spent time in federal and state prison for drug trafficking and fraud. Upon release in 2006, he had nothing but the clothes on his back, a bag of mail, and legal paperwork. In 2010, he kicked a long-time methamphetamine habit and started the long climb back up the ladder of life. This is the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast. If you want transparency and authenticity, you're in the right place. This is the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast, and this is Sean Dustin.
What's up, everybody? This is the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast, and I am your host, Sean Dustin. This is your first time listening. Welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. It's good to have you with us. Doing something a little bit different today. I had a request from my guest to read this intro or prelude to the episode, and I was like, all right, well, why not? I'll do that. I can oblige your request. You're a great guest, so sure, why not? And let's see if I get banned from YouTube for it. Not that I really care about that YouTube channel anyways. I'm buried in the algorithm, so it's not like I get a whole lot of views over there. So, if you are listening to this on the podcast platforms, do me a favor, go ahead and subscribe. That will help me to become more visible on the podcast platforms and the new and noteworthy and any of the other places that, you know, it helps boost you up to make you more visible. My guest today is Francis Richard Conolly. He is the director and producer of a documentary called From JFK to 9/11, Everything's a Rich Man's Trick. And you can find the direct links to that in the show notes or the description, depending on what you're watching on or listening to this on. It's a great documentary. It's about 3.5 hours long. It's a commitment, but when you start watching it and you see the connections that are being made throughout, and mind you, this documentary has been banned everywhere. So when they start banning things, you know that the truth is out there, and it's, you're touching on something that they don't want the public to see. So the link that I have in there is still available right now, but it could disappear at any point. So if that happens, and if you do try to watch this, if you're watching, down the line and the link doesn't work anymore, do me a favor and email me at nowheretogobutupnow@gmail.com, and I will try to make sure that I get a link that does work so you can view this, because I think this should be required viewing for every human. So anyways, that's only my personal opinion. So I'm going to go ahead and start this little prelude here. This interview was filmed several weeks before the mainstream media released the story about the breakaway European Football Super League. We were led to believe that this proposal had caused consternation throughout the entire football world, and every football pundit currently working for BBC or Sky News was dragged in front of the cameras to condemn it out of hand the moment the full details were known. Francis Richard Conolly, on the other hand, was equally dismissive, saying that this was quite obviously just another fake news story which the corrupt mainstream media was inflating out of all proportion, just as they did with the fake news about Oprah Winfrey and Meghan Markle. It was claimed... Hold on a second. It was claimed at first that both Chelsea and Manchester City, who have both reached the semifinals of the European Championship Cup, could be ejected from the competition and even banned from playing in it for decades to come. This is a classic example of the establishment trying to control its citizens through fear, because they know that there is nothing English football fans fear more than seeing the team they support being thrown out of the most prestigious competition in world football when they are only 180 minutes away from winning it. It was at this moment that Mr. Conolly predicted in emails to the managers of several Premier League clubs that nothing of the sort would ever happen, and that the story would be allowed to just fizzle out and not harm any team in any way for the rest of this season. Within just 24 hours, Mr. Conolly was proven correct. It first of all transpired that even such supremely well-respected figures as Jurgen Klopp, the manager of Liverpool, and Pep Guardiola, manager of Man City, had not even been told about this proposed break away by the owners of their respective clubs. Now, does that make any sense? That a club should be about to embark on the biggest sea change in their history, and yet they don't bother to consult with their manager about it beforehand. Makes me suspect. Give me a break. In the last few days, Klopp and Guardiola and all of the other top managers of the most prestigious league in the world have been made to look like fools as they have faced the TV cameras like schoolboys and shook their heads saying, "Honestly, the club didn't tell me a thing about this." It has all been just another classic example of mainstream media creating fake news in a desperate attempt to shift the focus off Prince Andrew and the pedophile scandal, which simply refuses to die down as the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell comes ever closer. So Mr. Conolly would like to ask all of those who are awake and follow his work a little favor. Could you please write a quick message to the British football pundits Rio Ferdinand, Jamie Carragher, Roy Keane, Gary Lineker, Alan Shearer, and most especially Gary Neville, who has been the most vocal, and tell them to stop being so bloody thick. For the whole of this season, they have been willing to parrot another entirely fake story that black players in England are being racially abused on social media, in spite of the fact that no one ever seems to be charged after being traced by the police through their Facebook account. How likely does that sound? So please try to explain to these simple ex-footballers that the ESL is just another fake news story the MI5 propaganda machine has invented to try and take everyone's mind off the Queen's favorite son, Prince Andrew. These men simply do not understand that they are being used as pawns in a much bigger political game. And until the day that such men as these crawl out of their mainstream media bubble and learn what reality is, Prince Andrew and his pedophile friends will continue to operate the VIP child sex abuse network, which abuses and murders thousands of children every year, and which was finally exposed with the demise of Jeffrey Epstein. There is one other thing. Just in case a Sydney-based Australian should read these words, please go to Point Piper and tell Scott Farquhar and Mike Cannon Brooks that Francis Richard Conolly has been trying to contact them and the establishment are preventing it. So this was just a favor to my guest to add that to the beginning of this episode. I'm aware of some of the stuff here, but I was not aware of any of the stuff going on about the Super League, stuff like that. So there you go, Francis. I hope you enjoyed my narration of that. And yeah, let's get to the show.
You'd better tell me, though, about this colourful background. Well, what about your own background? And just briefly, I mean, if you want to tell me, if it's okay.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So basically what I did, I grew up in an abusive home. My parents divorced when I was younger. They used me to get back at each other. And so I was like this pawn in a wicked game of chess. And, that just made me angry, and I carried that anger through,
very sorry.
throughout my whole life.
I grew up in a living home.
Yeah, it's just, well, it is what it is. I came out on the other side of it. And so, now I'm trying to do good things with it. But I ended up going to, struggled with addiction from the time I was about 16 to an addiction to methamphetamine, till the time I was 16 till I was 32, in my early 30s when I got out of, actually it wasn't even until when I got out of prison. When I got out of prison, like I said, 18 years of that plus, I went to prison, went to about 18 different institutions, between drug rehabs, juvenile halls, boys ranches, therapeutic communities, all of these things within that time frame. And,
you were locked up for 18 years.
Well, no, all the institutions, I've been to 18 different places, sporadically spread out throughout that period. Like, I would do time, I'd get out. I would go and I'd do good, and then I'd fall down again, and I'd end up in more trouble. And it just progressively got worse and worse and worse. And in 2006, I got out, and I got out of prison. I went back to my mom's, and then I wasn't done. I learned how to do credit card fraud and all these other things that you have to, like, I'm an intelligent guy. I was just using it in the wrong way. I'm a leader, but I was leading people to do bad things for me, right? And so, like, I was like a ringleader, I guess you would say. And so once I got out, I started, I had 2 violations, went to another rehab. And in 2010, something just clicked. I got into my union before I got in trouble, right? So I got in my union around 2007. I managed to not blow that. And I went back to it once I decided I wanted to turn my life around. And then I started rising up through the ranks of that, being a, sergeant at arms. Then I was on the executive board. I was a trustee. I ran for a business agent position. And, all of these things were just, helping me to realize that, you have to, you have to make goals and achieve goals in order to build your own self-esteem, right? Mm-hmm. And you have to do it in the right direction versus the way that I was doing it, because I couldn't be proud of any of that. My parents couldn't be proud of me. Yeah, I'm basically was selling drugs and running a business and doing all that other stuff, but I was doing it on the wrong side, which like I was running in place and wasting a bunch of energy that wasn't taking me anywhere except the wrong direction. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. It's that's a hell of a.
There's so much more. Yeah, there's so much more involved in that. From the fact that all my dad's side of the family were law enforcement, they're all cops, and so so it's just. Yeah, just a classic example of rebellion, right? And all of that. And so what ended up happening is I got off the meth in 2010, but then I ended up in a 7-year opiate addiction with pain pills. And 2 years or about 6 months before I started this podcast, I decided that I'm going to stop doing that because I can't. How am I going to talk about being transparent and authentic when I'm still getting these pills and I'm selling them to people and taking them and just still not being a good person, right? I did all of this work to try and go on the right path, but I still got my hands a little bit in the cookie jar, right? And so I had to quit doing all of that, had to stop doing the pills. I used edible marijuana to kick me off the withdrawal symptoms because I wasn't going to go to rehab. I've already been to 3 of them. What are they going to tell me that I don't already know, right? Yeah. And so I just did it on my own. And I used the podcast as my reason. And I wanted to tell my story, and I wanted to tell stories of other people that have been through things like me and how they got through it. And within all of that, it just sort of took on a life of its own. Like I started getting involved in alternative media. I already didn't believe a lot of the shit that they were saying anyways, right? When you were in that world, you already like we're divergents, right? You know what that you ever seen that movie Divergent?
No.
So basically, we're the outliers, the ones that that aren't susceptible to the mainstream magic, I guess you would say. Right. And so we knew something, like I knew shit just didn't make sense. When I went to prison, I was in with a gentleman who you may know who he is, Fritz Springmeier.
No, not heard that name.
No, he wrote the book Bloodlines of the Illuminati.
Oh, I have heard of that.
Yeah,
I've read so much, obviously, but I've heard of the book. I haven't read the book. No.
Yeah, so I was locked up with him, and I would walk the track with him at nighttime, and I'm just this dumb kid, right? I don't know anything, and, you know, I think I'm a dumb kid, and I didn't really know any of the stuff that he was talking about, and then he just started, like, opening my mind to, you know, the Watchtower Society, religion, and where all that started, and how that whole thing came about, and how it's the same. It's not, there's nothing different. They had all started in the same place. They just used it to divide people and to keep people in control. And it planted that seed, right, of, there's something else going on here. All right. But I forgot about it once I got out, right? And then it wasn't until I watched, it wasn't until I watched 9/11, what it was, it was called, what was the 9/11?
Loose Change.
Yeah, Loose Change. And I didn't know that was Jason Bermas that did that movie, right? And I started following Ricky and watching him. I got him on my show, and he was like the first person that I'd actually reached out that I was a fan of that said yes to be on the podcast. And then that just kind of opened the doors to all these other people, and, you know, you watching your movie, and just kind of down that rabbit hole of like, oh, okay, there's something more here. There's, you know, why are we being lied to? Yeah. Why is our school systems being dumbed down? And like when you telescope out and you look at it, because most people don't do that. They don't look above it and go, okay.
My friend, that is the big problem, is that most people can't do what you did then. Is that they can't take themselves out of their own situation. You know, they see everything through their own little world. And if something that, you know, a man like me, or, you know, with Loose Change, if it doesn't actually impact on their world, then they don't get it. You know what I mean? It's like you say, it's a skill actually that very few people have. I'll be very interested though with this, you know, colourful background that you've had, to see how it affects your both what kind of questions you're going to ask me and how they're asked. I'll be most, because if there's one thing about people who've been, you know, in trouble, or you know, anybody who's been to jail or been a thief, or, you know, anything like that, I find that they have a much better nose than anyone for bullshit.
Well, yeah, I was a manipulator. I was a master manipulator. I learned how to, I learned how to do that throughout my whole thing.
Go ahead then. I mean, you know, I'm looking forward to this more than ever now, because I don't think I've been. Have I been interviewed by someone who's been to prison? No, I don't think so. So go ahead. Anyway, ask me what you want to ask me. See what.
Right. So let's. Normally, I started off by, but it doesn't matter. This is a little bit different. Just a little backstory for the people that are going to be listening to this or watching this. This is Francis Richard Conolly. He's the director and writer of a documentary called From JFK to 9/11, Everything's a Rich Man's Trick. Or is it just everything's a rich man's trick and people added that other stuff to it?
No, the full title is JFK to 9/11, Everything is a Rich Man's Trick. Yeah, that's the full title, my friend, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I watched this documentary, and for those of you that follow me, you know that I like to amplify the signal of people that call out corruption. Whether it's in the judicial system, whether it's, you know, in whatever we're doing, I like to be that signal. And yes, it may affect my ratings. It may affect me in how I get buried in shadow banned and all that other stuff. But I think it's really important for people to understand what's really going on, or at least have an idea. You don't have to believe in it, but once you start, like I did, you telescope out and you look, and then all of the coincidences and all the things that kind of line up to I don't know, man, like it's like it's a trick, right? It's the inversion of our reality, where what you think you see is really the backside. What you think you see isn't what you see. The way it is the backside of it. And, they have us convinced that things are one way, but it's really a completely different, the opposite way. So, like, what's up is down, what's down is up, what's right's left. And by the time we actually get around to figuring it out, the game has changed. They switch it up on you. So you never really know what's happening or where you are. That's my take on it. And so I watched this movie and I was like, holy smokes. Like, you just condensed 100 years in 3.5 hours and made it hell of understandable.
Thank you.
And I was just like, I was amazed by this. And I was like, I was like, I mean, I've been telling everybody about it. And like, how long ago did you do this? Because I know it's not new.
Well, actually, it's a good thing you brought that up, Sean, because when you asked me on your show, as I usually do, I look at all of the various pirate copies. It may be useful, if you haven't already told your viewers, that to say once again that this is a film that, my film was banned by Donald Trump and by the Queen about 9 months after it was first put online. And there are myths growing up about it now. There was a public comment on one of the pirate copies that said this goes back all the way to 2012, doesn't it? Now, I don't know who started that rumor, but no, that's not true. We finished making it at the end of 2014, and basically it became the movie of 2015. If you look back at the people like Newsweek, there was a lot of professional media who were saying, this is it. This is the movie of 2015. You've got to see this movie. A lot of compliments about how professionally it was written and presented and all the rest of it. And that was when it started to get a huge amount of attention. And at that stage, although we didn't know what was going on with the hits within sort of the first 9 months, we didn't know exactly where the hits were. I was suspicious about what was going on because they were going up at 3,000 a night every night, exactly. And I thought, there's something wrong there. Could they be manipulating the hits? But it got to about 2 million or so. And then Andy Young, dear old Andy, who had me on Raconteurs News, he said, it's being underreported by a horrendous amount. And basically, it's been seen over 1 billion times. And then it was banned. So I think it's because of that it became a worldwide cult. I mean, I've actually lost count now of how many times I've been interviewed by Americans, and I was on Australian media from Sweden. I mean, it is definitely a global thing.
Yeah, it's dude. I love what you did. It really, really did paint the picture of, and it I believe it. I believe exactly what you have on there. I know that because Fritz.
Well, actually, can I make another point then, Sean, with that? Because when I was looking through the comments today, it was from a version that It's been uploaded by a man who goes under the title Truth Be Told. And at the top of the public comments, he says, I'm not sure that I get all of it, or I'm not sure about all of it, but even if half of this is true, we're in real trouble. Well, later on, if you scroll down through the public comments, somebody says to him, well, come on now, you can't say that. If there's something that you think is not quite right, or you disagree with it, or you're not completely convinced, you've got to say what. And as always, and this is what I always find, that there's no response. You see, and that's important because there's obviously the intelligence agencies have tried this trick many, many times where they say, oh, this is a great film, but, oh, you're quite sure that this bit's right and that bit's right. You see, right, just to try and discredit it. You know, you get that all the time with these, tricks that the intelligence agents pull. So when there's a comment there that seems to be genuine, it's important to me. Excuse me, I'm very sorry.
Sorry.
We've had a windy day here. That people, if they're going to say, I wasn't sure about one little bit or wasn't sure about one little bit, you've got to say why. And I have never, ever, ever, not once, in all, I would have to say now, the history of this film, I've never, ever yet seen anyone take any single point from my film and say, I disagree with that because of this, and here's the criteria, and the criteria seems to be strong and impressive. I've never known that. What has actually happened is that the opposite tends to be true. Since the movie came out, and I think your viewers will be interested to hear this, what has happened is that people have watched my movie, they've, gone, wow, like you did, and they've started doing their own research. Mm-hmm. And what they've tended to do is find supporting evidence for what I've said. And it's actually been very interesting that a lot of people very quickly started writing to me and saying, Mr. Conolly, not only are you totally right, but did you know that Hugo Boss were part of the people who had Jewish slaves during the war? Mm-hmm. And did you know this firm did? And did you know that Siemens did? Actually, I did. There just wasn't room to put it in the movie. But it's recently come out that even BMW and VW, the car makers, were using Jewish slaves during the war. So it is possible to say that the can that I leave it open has now been poured all over the floor, and that it's possible to say now, I think, without too much, danger of any comeback, that the entirety of German industry during the Second World War were responsible for slave labor and were slave labor profiteers. And it's not like they've ever apologized for it or done anything about it.
No. As a matter of fact, they just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and the money, they just. So I was thinking about this the other day. I've been playing around on Clubhouse. Have you heard about Clubhouse?
No.
It's if you have an iPhone, it's a place where you can go where it's audio only, and they're rooms that people go in and they have deep conversations and they talk about stuff. I mean, it's really how it's taking off and what's happening in that ecosystem over there is unlike anything I've ever seen ever before in my life. The real conversations that are taking place, people are just being open, honest, and real, and especially in the spaces that I'm in, it's really refreshing, and I think between podcasting and that type of communication, because we're communicating with all over the world, people that have access to this. It's really the last frontier of free speech, because they haven't got a chance. The podcasts are going to come after them at some point and shut them down because we're able to say too much. And in this one, I'm sure they're going to try to come after that. That's why I've been encouraging people that are in there that are, talking about doing other apps like this. I'm like, dude, do more. because, it's one of those things. Once, they can't take them all down all at once. And so when one goes, there has to be more in its place. And I think the only way that we're going to beat mainstream media is with our own media. And, you've got to fight fire with fire. What drowns out bad speech is better speech, right?
Yeah.
So it looks like a very long road, and with what I'm doing on the outside and what I'm trying to do with the nonprofit and the network that I want to build for my population, they may not like what I'm saying, but to me that's real, and you can't deny any of this when they're all the social media and all the mainstream, when they bury things and don't report on them, because, and you can take whatever you want at that. You talk a lot about this in Ricky's interview with you, how journalism, like journalists now, should be ashamed of themselves.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, look at this thing, and I think maybe we'd better talk about this up front, because I think it's the main sort of topic that's been going down in the last few weeks, Sean. I think people would want me to say something about it. But how much more shameful could this whole thing have been with Meghan Markle and Oprah Winfrey? I've no doubt that people will expect me to say this, but I'm going to say it. Mm-hmm. I hope that all of the people who've been following my work, and yours and Ricky's, have been able to see that Oprah and Meghan were just acting. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what that was. I mean, to me, the camera angles, the editing, the presentation, and the delivery, the preciseness of the way in which Oprah's jaw drops open. With the thing about, they were wondering what color my baby was going to be. I mean, let's start with something very simple. To begin with, Meghan Markle. That's a colored woman? Come on. She is as black as an albino rabbit. Come on. I mean, well, get real. I mean, it's absolutely stupid. She's supposed to have one coloured parent or something. I have always thought that she looks, and I think this is why she was chosen, very, very much so like an English public school girl. In the years that I taught in public schools, we've got some extremely posh... see this? I'm going to have to explain that, because it's the other way around in America. What public schools here are private schools. They're the moneyed schools, mm-hmm. And the ones, as I say, that are in Yorkshire, especially Ampleforth, that's where you meet the absolute elite. That's how I wound up knowing what these people are like, mm-hmm. Because I was teaching them. And Meghan Markle, I always thought from the very start, has got a very, like I say, British public school girl face. And I think, first of all, she was chosen because she was an American divorcee, and I think that they wanted that to be a hook into the whole story of her and the prince, because it's the same thing as Edward and Mrs. Simpson. What Edward and Wallace Simpson. It's the same thing. Oh, he married an American divorcee. So then the journalists have got an easy link to that. You see, they can make comparisons. But in that conversation with Oprah, that was simply fake news. That's all it was. That whole thing was made up. And why was it made up? Because they're trying to shift the focus away from Prince Andrew. And the thing that's most delighted me over this past couple of weeks is the amount of people who've seen it and said so. One of the lawyers representing Epstein's victims and Ghislaine Maxwell's victims said so immediately. And again, it's interesting. The most interesting thing going on at the moment is how much autonomy do the mainstream media journalists have? because I've been surprised sometimes at those who have definitely come out against Prince Andrew and kept the Prince Andrew story going. Do you think Americans are aware of of who Lorraine Kelly is? Do you think? Do you know that name?
I'm not even familiar with that name.
Well, she does the morning breakfast show after Piers Morgan, or did until he, so dramatically quit. And what I found is that people did instantly see that the whole thing with Piers Morgan walking away, that was just trying to put drama on top of the story. I mean, it's just absolute bull. It was really obvious. Children I know have said, "Oh, he's that man again. He's just giving it more of this every bloody time." It's you don't need to be a genius to see that Piers was acting, and like I say, I think that there's been fewer people, but I think it is getting there now that they're starting to realise that the whole Meghan Oprah thing was to get the spotlight off Prince Andrew. And like I say, Lorraine Kelly, who's this little Scottish woman, and she's a pleasant little thing, she apparently made a very deliberate effort to throw her hat into the ring, as it were, by waiting until the credits were rolling and then saying out loud, the only person who will be happy about this is Prince Andrew. So, and that was going out on mainstream media. So it's been, as I say, it hasn't worked. It didn't work. And as soon as I realized that it wasn't going to work, I thought, I know what they're going to do here. They're going to bring up something else to try to get people brainwashed and looking at something else. The whole, Meghan Markle thing, it's fallen flat, hasn't done its job. So what are they going to do? They're going to bring up something else. That was what I was thinking. And sure enough, we have this story about this Sarah Everhard, who's supposed to be this beautiful woman. It's always a pretty girl. Mm-hmm. It's always a pretty girl in every bloody story. And she's supposed to be this beautiful woman murdered by a police officer. And a couple of days afterwards, and I sent you the photograph. There was all these pictures on the front of our tabloid papers here. Photographs of protests in London, allegedly. Thousands of women saying, "Oh, we're not protected by the police at all, and it's disgusting." And you've never seen such obviously fake photographs. If I had enough time, and I would need to be in a lecture theatre, I could show people how the Charlie Hebdo photographs were a collage of pictures from other demonstrations from long ago that were sort of glued together. And today, with the technology that they have, it can make it seem like one thing.
Yeah.
But the problem that they've had this time is that because everybody's wearing a mask at the moment, they've had to paint masks on, you see, and that completely distorts the entire effect. That the depth perception isn't there. You can see that the mask, as it were, is right at the front of the screen. It's not on the person. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And they tried to get round that by having everybody hold up their mobile phones, so it looks like they're at a fireworks display, holding up a firework. But you can tell, even so, that there's no depth to the picture. So there's another classic example of mainstream media trying to completely mislead the public as to what's going on out in the real world, and trying to create a mainstream media bubble that people can basically drown in and lose their heads in. And that's what's, as I say, been going on here over the last few weeks, or a few days. It's not that long now. That's what's been going on here over the last few days. And I, the feedback I've had is that it's, it's not making a difference. People are seeing through it. And this whole thing with Prince Andrew is just not going away. And I'm very pleased about it. I'm very sorry I've messed up the film.
Oh, no, you're all right. Yeah, so, I mean, I believe, and I think you had mentioned it in that interview with Ricky from the Ripple Effect podcast, which if anybody out there subscribe to that show, he's got a great show. He's got great guests on his show, just like Francis here. But he's doing bigger things than I am. I'm just in the beginning phases of kind of what I'm doing, and but I'm in a different lane as well too. So, but what I noticed is that, or my thoughts on this with Epstein is, so Ghislaine Maxwell gets busted. You got Jean-Luc Brunel who gets busted. So you've got pieces of these things are coming out, but every time something comes out, there's another distraction to kind of like shift the focus away from what's happening. Exactly. You know, like the news focus away from it. And what I think it is I wouldn't be surprised at the timing of when the pandemic hit was around the time that all of this stuff started coming out about the child trafficking,
my friend.
All that stuff. And so the reason why they're willing to put that much into it, because if we found out that that's what was really going on, there would probably be a worldwide revolt, you know?
Yes.
And there's no coming back from that, right? There's no coming back from realizing that, you know, that the I don't know what they call them, the intelligence services do what they do to get politicians in their pocket and get legislation passed the way that they need to, you know, because when you think about some of the things that they do, and it just doesn't make sense, the laws that get passed or the stimulus bills that have so much pork in them or fat in them, you know, that don't even address, like we just had another 1.9 trillion infusion that most of it didn't even make it to the people that it actually affected. It's, you know, giving it to the donor class and all of these other people. And so I feel like a lot of these people are bought and paid for. And the difference is now is that they used to be able to kill your credibility with taking pictures of you cheating on your wife with a prostitute. Well, now no one gives a shit about that.
Exactly.
No one cares if you're screwing somebody and being unfaithful in your marriage. That's not a career killer anymore.
Exactly. But with children, that's it.
Yeah, there's no coming back. There's no coming back from that.
When Orwell was at the height of his powers, he wrote this book, The Lion and the Unicorn, and said some very interesting things about the British. The most interesting being that the British really don't have or need any kind of philosophy or a world view. It's just not what they go in for at all. But he did say that the way that our class system works is that if the people at the very top get a little tug from below that makes them, you know, the public get the message across somehow, no, you can't do that, then the people at the very top respond. And I'll bet you if he was here right now, he'd be saying that this whole thing with Prince Andrew is the classic example. People, as you say, Sean, I mean, you know, this man, it turned out he had a boyfriend. Who cares now? Mm. You know, or it turned out he was, you know, shagging half a dozen Chinese women or dozens of nuns. Today, I mean, we live in a. I do think, you know, this thing with Jim Jeffries. He did this really funny sketch, which I thought was his best work, where you know, where he did the thing, the egg story, you know, showing the plastic egg up his bum, and I think that has really altered our culture, far more than people realize. He was completely honest about making a complete fool of himself by trying to have the greatest session of masturbation that anybody's ever had. And I think it's brought a frankness to discourse that anything that involving sexuality that has ever been before. And as you say, people today do not go off the deep end with anything to do with homosexuality, with masturbation, with playing around with women in any sense. But it is still there that nobody is going to accept anything to do with child sex. That is the cut-off point. Everybody reacts in the same way. And the people at the top know it. And like I say, with this thing with Lorraine Kelly, when the interview with Emily Maitlis happened, the next morning, to my great surprise, she had a woman called Jenny Bond. I don't suppose you'll have heard that name either. Jenny Bond. No, she was a BBC presenter for a lot of years. Classic upper middle class Hampstead voice, etc. And she was just archetypically BBC. And she was the kind of woman who I thought, because it was a royal family story, I thought she might be happy to just leave it alone and to just not discuss it. So I was slightly surprised that she was one of the first ones to say that Prince Andrew has made a complete, fool of himself. And Lorraine Kelly and this woman really basically eviscerated Prince Andrew for about half an hour. You can still see this. It's on YouTube if anybody wants to see it. I think your audience might be interested to see that, because they absolutely dismantled Prince Andrew and basically were saying, that the whole thing about not sweating, that's going to haunt him to his grave. That's how he's going to be remembered. And this is true. It's very true. So, this whole thing with, how much autonomy do British journalists have? That's the interesting question at the moment. And I'm wondering whether it's going to affect this whole thing about, Ghislaine Maxwell's trial. I want to say again, as I did on the Ripple Effect, and I said so on The Truth Dealers, and I don't see any reason to change my view up to this point. I still do not believe that Ghislaine Maxwell is incarcerated. I have tried and tried and tried to find somebody, because I obviously can't fly at the moment. They just shoot the plane down. I've tried to find somebody who could go to the MDC and try to get a word with the guards or whatever, and try to film her actually in her prison cell. I don't believe she's there. I still say it's just a ruse to try and take the attention away from Prince Andrew. But if I'm wrong, and the July is getting closer and closer and closer, I still don't believe that we're ever going to see in court a woman who could finger all of the most powerful men in the world. I just can't believe that will ever happen. I think this whole thing will end with the news everybody is expecting. Oh, guess what, everybody?
She died.
Somebody in prison, crazy woman stabbed her when she was sweeping the floor, or she's caught some disease or something. They're going to bring out something, some excuse to bury the story. I think they're just spinning it out now, as long as they have, to try, as I say, to get the Prince Andrew thing to finally die away. And it's not dying away, and it won't die away. There are so many people like yourself in the world now who want to know what has really been going on there, and who want to know what the whole thing has really been about. So, as I say, this whole thing with Lorraine Kelly and Jelly Bond, I'll be interested to see whether they, at any time, and I don't think they will, but sometimes people surprise you. I'll be interested to see whether they take it upon themselves, to any degree, to try and find out what is it? Well, yeah, is really going on, and trying to find out what the people really want to know. It's been pointed out over and over again that no one in your government, no one in your media, nobody in the British media has made any attempt to try and find out the links between Epstein and the intelligence services and Maxwell and the intelligence service. Nobody has. Why is that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, her dad was Mossad, right?
Exactly.
John,
well, he was
Robert Maxwell. Is that what his name was?
Robert Maxwell.
He was also a big-time book publisher, or had something to do with publishing.
Pergamon Press was his thing. Again, very suspicious. How he wound up with that. Pergamon Press were a hugely successful publisher of academic books. They were publishing all of the science papers in Britain. Very interesting manipulation, I think, by the people at the very top, that he was given credibility by that means. His Pergamon Press were very important at one stage, but once he was gone, and I still don't believe that, his death happened. I believe he faked his own death. He did not commit suicide. He wasn't the type to commit suicide. He was too much of a megalomaniac. Yeah. But I still say that he faked his own death. But once he was gone, that was the end of Pergamon Press. It was sold to somebody else.
So, my question to you is, how did you get involved in even making a documentary? Is that in your background, or did you have filmmaking in your background, or you a writer, or you said you were a teacher, right?
No, I started out as an artist, basically as a painter. I did art at York University, and I went there because it was one of the first degrees offered that was split, and you could do film studies with art, you say. So I was painting in the mornings and learning how to make films in the afternoon. And oh God, I don't want to be immodest, but I was very surprised at how the paucity, put it that way, of the effort of the other students surprised me. They didn't seem to want to make movies and have something to say. And it actually got quite embarrassing, because there were staff members who used to come to me to make films for them once I got a reputation. So that was how it started. And professionally, I made documentaries for the British Health Service here and things like that. And I wanted to be, the plan was that I was going to make, documentaries for the BBC or something like that. And then move from there into movies, because I wanted to be a dramatist. But now that I look back, I'm perfectly certain that from the day I was born, that the MI5 had me under a microscope because of my grandfather, because they do this. I've no doubt anybody who is effectively anti-establishment, they target their families and their offspring. And my grandfather was one of the men who organised the Jarrow March, which I've tried to explain before. I won't take long on that, but it was a very important, very big part of the history of British industrial relations, the Jarrow March. It took a lot of organising, and like I say, my grandfather was one of the preeminent personalities in that. And now that looking at how things went for me, I can see that they've targeted me from, I say, virtually the day that I was born, to make sure that I was never given a job that had any great power. Media is. That's why I had to go teaching for so long. And I very nearly, I was very, very close to making a breakthrough. I mean, I did finally with the BBC. I had a play on the BBC, but I, very nearly made a breakthrough into Hollywood because the gentleman who produced, oh God, what was his name? Parfit. David Parfit. That right? He produced a Hollywood movie that won an Oscar. He was interested in a couple of scripts that I wrote, and he was even considering making both of them from the same budget. And I'd still be perfectly willing to make them if anybody's out there wants to put up the budget. They're both war films, so that the date doesn't matter. But like I say, that was I was actually in the middle of writing one of my screenplays, and this whole thing started with 9/11, which was why I actually took a while. I didn't hit the ground running, put it that way, with 9/11. I was sure when it first happened that it was, there was something wrong. But bit by bit, I started to realize how wrong it was, which culminated in finding out that, the BBC's own people, who obviously hadn't read the right script because they were working in the Middle East, and they found out that the hijackers were all alive. That wasn't supposed to happen at all, Sean. That I can tell you now. I bet you somebody got fired 100 times over for that, and that was not meant to happen. That was a huge error on the BBC's part. I'm sure about that. I bet a lot of people lost their jobs over that. But once that, as I say, that information came on board, and I'd spent my whole life trying to find out the truth about Kennedy, and then all of a sudden there was this melding of the two stories, and that was when I realized I'm going to have to put the screenplays to one side and the drama to one side for now, and I've got suddenly a lot of work to do, and that was when I started to write the story.
Yeah, I like the way that you connected the families, the Bushes. A lot of people don't know that the Bush family is really one of the biggest crime families in the United States. Next to the Clintons, and some of the other families. But I mean, it's just like I was telling somebody once, and in order to understand the national scene, look at your own local politics, right? And there's always going to be somebody in your township or your county or your area that's been there for the longest, and it's usually those families that own everything.
Yeah.
And those families get breaks from the city councils, and they're allowed to do things, and you'll see businesses pop up next to other businesses that are already like, well, why would you put another gas station there when we have this one over here? Well, it's a bigger and better one, and they want to X that one out, right? Because if something better comes along, then it's just going to push them out of business. But would you, like, if you were thinking common sense wise, like, why would you do that? It doesn't make sense unless it's, like I wouldn't, if I was on a board and on the city council and somebody came to me and said, I want to put a like business, like one that's already there, I would be like, well, no, it's probably not a good idea. Why don't you pick a different location, so it's fair. But
you see, this is why I think that what you're doing specifically, Sean, could turn out to be very important, because the focus you seem to be taking is very much one of practicality, of politics that goes right down to a local level, and is really about the thing that this is really all about, which is, ordinary working people suffering because of the corruption in your country and mine. And how the behavior of the crazy George Bushes and Donald Trumps and Clintons and one thing and another manifests itself on the street. I mean, look at I've been just shocked. No, I'm not shocked, but it is absolutely horrific to see what's happened to Los Angeles in just the last sort of year. I mean, there's more people living on the street than are living in homes. And, why is that happening? It's happening because it's a deliberate policy of your corrupt political class at this moment in time to frighten people, to hold them down, to keep them living in fear by creating these appalling social scenes of so many Americans being homeless. And basically the whole idea is to say, you damn well obey us or you're going to wind up in the same situation. And so, they hope, with that kind of tactic, that no one is going to kick against, the structure of society. But that is what we all have got to do. And that's why I'm glad that, this approach this basic approach that you're taking, it is the right approach. It is to start with the working man, with the nurse, with the bricklayer, with the teacher, with the university professor, and say to all of them, we've all got a common bond. We all have a common goal. And any opportunity that there is to dismantle this system that we've got to take it, because, Americans have got to face up to it, that the American way has failed. It's the wrong way.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of them are. It's everything. It doesn't matter. I know that I don't know much about your political system, but I know that the one here is there's one government, and it's a donor class. It's the people that are paying the politicians, giving them money for re-elections, doing all of these things to like, they've literally captured our government to where it doesn't work for the people anymore. And I don't know if at any point in time it ever did. I think maybe who's that guy that did the New Deal? Roosevelt, FDR.
FDR.
Yeah, but they're all kind of the same, right? They all run around in the same circles. They're elites. Nancy Pelosi, she's the same thing. It's like, all right, well, why is it okay for you to be enriched because you have information that the government is now going to be buying, switching all of their vehicles over to Teslas, and you just went and dumped a bunch of money into Tesla stock.
Yeah, into Tesla stock, exactly.
Now you've made more money. But if I were to do that and somebody gave me a tip, I'd go to jail.
Exactly. Yeah. The billionaires and trillionaires in this world have made another horrific amount of money purely and simply because they knew the pandemic was coming, knew which shares to buy, and all of the people basically who make face masks and all the other paraphernalia that's involved with the pandemic, they've made a ton of money. This is what I'm trying to get across to people, is that if you want to be in that inner circle, if you want to be up there at the top, you've got to sell your soul. That's what it costs. You have to sell your soul. You've got to abuse a child and let them film it, and that is how they control you. And once you're in that circle that's at the very top, and it's a very small circle, Ronald Bernard, this man whose testimony has been so important about child abuse, he reckons that it doesn't cover more than just a few thousand men, and that they rule everything. And they are in the know, as you say. It's they and they alone who have all of the most important information. And therefore, because you don't have that information, how on earth can you ever beat them? How on earth can you ever take them on? How on earth can they become unassailable? So, and that's the whole idea. They want to have a game that it would be exactly like a game of football played on a pitch that was, a hill, and they want to be able to cement up their own goal, and your goal has to be bigger than usual, and that's the way that people think. That's the way that a ruling class thinks, and they believe that It's nature. The best description I've ever heard of these people. And then I came across a few years ago. I heard someone say that they are genuinely social Darwinists. They really do believe that some people are smarter than others, just the same as a lion. It bites harder than a hyena. So that's it. It's just nature for some people to dominate the whole world, and they really believe that, and that's why we've got this situation with the Queen and the princes and Meghan Markle, because they think they're genuinely entitled to mislead and misinform and deceive their own people. It's class war.
Yeah. I mean, I often believe that it's not. I think they use racism as a cloak to hide the class system.
Well, the thing with racism, Sean, the most important thing with it is that they know, you see, that most white people have got no idea about the truth of what black slavery was and who was responsible for it. They have no idea that the black man was every bit as responsible for black slavery as the white man. Some people think even more so. So because they, most of the public are ignorant about the true history of black slavery, and because I think, there's very few people who are free from any kind of racial tension, they've used race as a club almost. If you're being constantly told day in day out by the media, oh, you're a racist, and you don't love black people as much as you should, and you don't give them a job, and you don't give them a chance, on and on every day. This coverage, it's like a sermon that never stops. The effect of that, and this is the whole idea, is self-censorship. If a person thinks that they're at all guilty of racism, then they try not to think about it. And when you're trying not to think about one subject, you don't think about anything. That's the whole idea. It's self-censorship. That's why race has been, and that's why they used it with this whole Meghan Markle thing and tried to make such a drama, such an episode of Dallas out of it.
Yeah, what I do believe though is I do believe in systematic racism, and the systems that they have in place that keep poor people down, keep people in their places. I believe that exists, but the more overt racism, I think racism has become more covert versus overt. It's been a long time, but maybe it's because I'm in California, and California is really kind of liberal, and everybody kind of is love everyone, and you don't see a whole lot of that going on. But what I have noticed though, and I do have another question to circle back, but I want to say this while it's still in my mind. So what I noticed the other day, or actually it was last night, and I was talking in a room, and we were speaking about different subjects, and like the whole mask thing, the whole pandemic thing, how people were, if you don't believe that if you don't want to wear a mask, then you're part of the problem. That, it's that division thing, right? Well, in the beginning of the pandemic, they locked us all down so we couldn't congregate. So we couldn't talk about, hey, is this kind of strange to you? Because where does that usually happen? That happens in the parks. It happens at the bars. It happens, in places where people congregate. They start exchanging ideas and going, hey, this seems really funny to me. What do you see? Like, what are you seeing? And they eliminated all of that. Now you can't even get people to even talk about it, because they're afraid they're going to be ridiculed by somebody saying, oh, you're a denier? Are you denying that there's no pandemic? And so nobody's even talking about it. And so I noticed that in these rooms, and I'm going, God, that's so crazy how they were just able to, how they're able to do that. And so it's just like, even now that we're able to go out, the conversation is shut down because nobody wants to engage in it.
Self-censorship. Yeah.
just what you're saying.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So the question that I wanted to ask was, so with these very powerful people that you're calling out, and the things that you've put out there, did you ever at any point worry that you would get any pushback from it in a negative, like cancel Francis kind of way?
How do you mean by pushback? That's not a word that we hear over here. Well,
like friction, like obviously you weren't worried about it because you put it out there. But after you put it out there, did it ever cross your mind that maybe they might try to come after you for it and quiet you?
Well, I was threatened, emails and phone calls and whatnot. But I've always taken the view that if you're up against fascism, which is what we're up against, I mean, our democracy is just a carefully crafted illusion. That is all it is. It's something that it's a spell that they cast every day to make us think that we're free when we're not. And when you're up against fascism, I mean, it's just the same as fighting Hitler. I mean, you've got two choices. You can either lie down and accept it, which means your one and only life is going to be wasted because you're not going to live at all, or you can stand up and do what's right. So I stand up, or try to stand up and do what's right. And one of the things that I think is that's come out of this whole era, and I was so pleased to see this. Somewhere on YouTube, there's a video that goes under the title, and I hope your audience look it up. But it's put under the title, probably the most honest 3 minutes of television and television history. I hope I've got that right. But it's an excerpt from some American TV series that we've not had here. I don't know if it's called The Newsroom or something like that. But in it, there's a man who gives this absolutely devastating speech about America no longer being the greatest country in the world. I'll come back to that in a moment because that in itself is just a rich man's trick. But he says that in the past, the biggest difference between I would say Americans at the time of the revolution and certainly since then, all the way up until now, but I think it's true of other people as well, is that in the past people just didn't scare so easily. That's one of the big problems that we've got today, is that people scare too easily. The people who are doing this to us, they're just people. They get scared too. They're absolutely shitting bricks at this moment in time. They are absolutely terrified that at any moment a mob is going to come and tear down Buckingham Palace and drag Prince Andrew out. That's what the Queen is terrified of, seeing her favourite son being attacked by the mob. That's why we've been locked down. And the American ruling class are every bit as worried about having a real instead of a fake attack, because the one that we saw, that was just, again, fake news.
Oh, the insurrection?
The insurrection was just totally fake. Nobody's telling me that there was anything real about that. They knew that Trump was on his way out, and they just, how they always say, if there's a crisis, you must never let a crisis go to waste. They knew that Trump was on his way out, so it's okay, let's, drum up a story about it. But the people who were filmed inside those offices, the ones who were just calmly walking about, Sean, I've seen a riot. I know what a riot looks like. When I was a little boy, sometimes I used to go to watch Newcastle United play at a place called St. James's Park, which is a very famous stadium that we have in this country. And I've seen riots there. I know how people behave.
Yeah, it's chaos.
Excuse me, during a riot, and there was nothing about that was genuine. That was a fake riot.
Yeah, I didn't believe that it was either, because I mean, when it came out, you literally see them letting them through the doors, and kind of like, walking in, taking selfies with the. It's almost like it was a field trip in some aspects.
Yeah.
And yeah, some people got shot and some people, got hurt, and there were some other things. And don't take this the wrong way, that I'm a Trump supporter and I, support violence and all of that. I don't. I think there's a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things, but there are some things that you just can't. You can't just use your brain, common sense. If it doesn't fit, you got to look at it a little closer. And I think a huge part of the problem is that, when people, they've got it down to a point to where when you're going to school, you don't pay attention to anything. Now they don't really teach you a whole lot in terms of like learning how to have critical thinking skills. They dumb you down with the education. And by the time you actually they dumb you down with the education, then you go into, if you decide you want to go into college, they load you up with debt. So now you have no choice but to work a job you don't like, for money to pay off that debt. So you get indoctrinated, you get into debt, and you get indoctrinated into debt slavery from the time you get into college. And now they have this debt over you, which you can never get rid of, because the government subsidizes the loans that they give you, and so now you're in debt to the government forever until you pay that off.
And now you're controlled.
Yeah,
for all of your life, and that is what it's all about. And that's why, as I said earlier, Sean, I think that you're taking the right approach with what you do, because it's this kind of control that we've got to break free from. And what I'm trying to do is make people realize that it isn't just the loan that you have to take out as a student, that it is absolutely endemic in everything. Everything. Every part of American life and British life. The justice system, the media system, absolutely everything is corrupt now to the marrow of its bones. And it's all about keeping you under the thumb of the rich man from the moment you're born to the moment that you die. That really you're never able to break free. And the only way, as I said, that you can ever be sort of wealthy and ever be part of a leisure class is to sell your soul, as Ghislaine Maxwell has done. That's the only way. Okay, that there have been people. The only way that you can
anomalies. They're anomalies.
Yeah, if you're as talented as Billy Connolly or Paul McCartney or John McEnroe, well then. But you see that I've found that they find ways to control people like that as well. So if we're ever going to break free, this is the thing that people need to realize. Is that absolutely everything you should not accept anything that you're given. Anything. It doesn't matter no matter what you're told at school, no matter what you're told as an adult at work, no matter what you're told by the media, your first thought should always be, is this a lie? And is this something that's been designed to control me? Because everything has been.
Yeah. Well, that's what they tell you when you're in prison. Don't ever accept something from somebody. Like if somebody comes up to you and they want to offer you something and say, hey man, here you go, I'm just trying to help you out. No. There's something that's always attached to that. Once you accept it, that you are now in a contract for something you may not even know you're in a contract for.
Yeah. Especially
if it's somebody that's bigger than you. You could be in a contract for something that you definitely don't want.
Particularly if he's holding a jar of Vaseline.
Yeah, right. So yeah, that's a good point. That's great, man. So you wanted to talk about some other stuff too, like I kind of got all my the questions that I want kind of answered. I mean, we're kind of in the same thing, right? We both think sort of the same way, and I just I don't know, man. I don't how do you win? I mean, how do you maneuver in this when you know all of this, right? And you're trying to get people and wake people up, and most people are so busy in their day-to-day lives that they don't have the time, and I think that's by design. If we keep them so busy, they don't have a chance to look any further than what's in front of them.
Yeah.
And by the time you wake up, it's already too late. You already own a bunch of debt. You have a family, you have a mortgage, you have all of these things that still enslave you into the system or the matrix or whatever it is that you want to call it.
Yeah.
And so you either buck the system and figure out a way to make money and get away from it. And I remember somebody was telling me something. There was a homeless person, and I thought to myself, I'm like, you know what? They're the only ones that are free. I mean, yeah, it sucks the way they have to live, but I mean, if you really think about it, they don't have any responsibility. They're not being subjected to the constant bombardment from mainstream media. Once you turn it on, it's literally, it's repeat, rinse,
Yeah.
repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse. And that's that programming, right? You're being flashed. You're being flash mobbed information to where now it's been imprinted on you. And when I turn it on now, since I don't watch it at all, it's just like, turn it off. Get it away from me, because it's like I'm being attacked, and it's traumatizing, and there's just something about it. Once you unplug from it, when you see it again, it's almost like you come across your abuser, right?
Yeah.
And
That's a great way to express that, my friend. Yeah.
And what is PTSD? It's the anxiety that you get from being in the same space. Like take somebody who's been raped or brutally raped or something, and the moment that they see that person, right? It's like they're frozen in time. They're just like, then they start shaking, and it's like they don't know what to do. Sometimes you see a kid and they'll pee their pants, right? Because that's that PTSD and that anxiety that they brings into you. And I feel the same way about our government, and I feel the same way about the media, mainstream media, and the news outlets. Our government is responsible for that too, because I feel like with what they do to us, and how, like America, we're the only ones that we've gotten 1,800, 1,400, 2,000, maybe, I think 2,200, 2,600 total since the pandemic started and they shut everything down, where you have other countries that are getting taken care of, but they're not doing that here. So I feel like we're in this abusive relationship with our government. It's almost a narcissistic abuser.
Yeah. The thing is, Sean, that the reason that it's become so much more intense, that us being hammered down, the reason that police officers have very, I mean, I don't know how much Americans have noticed the change. You probably haven't noticed it as much as we have, where the behavior of the police are concerned, because my one direct experience of police brutality with American cops was when I was in New York in, I think it was 1982, and there was a black man who was drunk lying on the pavement, and he wasn't harming anybody. He had bare feet. He just had a pair of jeans on, and I was just going to step round him. He was just sort of intoxicated. And there was a couple of cops walking towards me, and I was struck by how sinister they were in comparison to British cops at the time. In those days, the average British policeman felt like a gentleman. He really did. That was what it was like then. And they didn't have a paramilitary uniform on here then. Mm-hmm. It was a sort of an old blue thing with that silly pointed helmet. And, you know, yes, they were dumb, but they weren't thugs, or not obviously thugs. So as I'm watching these two American policemen, they've both got the dark glasses on that makes you look like a robot. And it was the insouciant way that they just drew their nightsticks and laid into this black man, hitting him on the head, on the shins, and everything. And he was in agony in seconds. And basically, they stuck the sticks in his guts and said, "Sit up, you asshole," and all this kind of thing. I thought, my God, this is American law enforcement. This is what it should be like. So if it was like that then, you may not have noticed such a huge change. But in this country, like I say, when I was an undergraduate, you wouldn't have said that anybody would have wanted to complain much about the behavior of the police. There was corruption, but as civilized human beings, they didn't have too much wrong with them then. Now, the cops here are much more like your cops. They're much more in your face. They appear to be hiring people who are much more ignorant, much more brutal, much more inclined to fight and get in your face. And this whole thing is happening because you and I are having this conversation, and there are millions of people all over the world having identical conversations. We're learning more. We're growing. There's this intellectual growth that's happening because of films like my own that are out there, and Loose Change, and because there are men out there like David Icke. There's this swelling of the intellect, swelling of awareness. More and more people are getting awake. That was why I made such a point when I was on with Ricky Varandas, and I'd like to make it again, that this is why they've tried to take the whole notion of what woke culture is, and they've perverted it. I'll let people see the interview that Ricky did with me, rather than spoil your own interview, because they can find that. I think I go on about it quite a bit there, but it's because the people at the top feel increasingly threatened, that they're increasingly brutally trying to slam it down and doing more and more dirty things, like making all the people in Los Angeles homeless. That is why all of these things are happening. And that is why it is getting more and more and more and more to a breaking point. And when you say, how do we win this in the end? I don't think we are far away from winning it. I really don't. My big fear at this moment in time. Sorry, I'm really struggling tonight.
No worries.
More water in a minute. That my big fear in all of this is that they'll do something really crazy. I still want people to look at the film, but in the film, I've brought up the scenario: what if they really did launch a nuclear weapon on their own people and claim it's North Korea or the Chinese or something like that? If we keep pushing them at the rate that we are now, and they just become more and more and more paranoid, which is what tends to happen, my big fear is that, in order to stay in power, because power is the only thing they know, power is the only thing that they want. That's what the ruling class are about. It's just purely and simply power. You can guarantee that if they ever use a nuclear weapon against their own people, it won't be dropped anywhere near Wall Street. Anybody living in New York is going to be safe. I would be very surprised if they harmed anywhere near Los Angeles, because that's where Hollywood is.
Not Silicon Valley, because that's where Facebook and all the big tech people are.
Exactly. It ain't going to be dropped there. I wouldn't be surprised, as I said in the film, if, Chicago, maybe one of the poorer southern states, it'd be more likely there. But that is my fear, is that we're going to see something absolutely crazy like that. And if it comes, Americans are going to, if your own government drops a nuclear weapon on its own people, well, then you're going to have no choice. You're going to have, I said it on the Justin Stellman show. I'm going to say it again. You've all got guns. There's nothing to stop the American people having a revolt like that could be successful. The British and the Europeans, we don't have weapons. I've never seen a gun, hardly. That may seem incredible to you, but I've never seen a gun on the street.
Yeah.
In my entire life. The only time I ever was near a gun was when I was chipping a golf ball one day at a field a couple of miles away, and a gamekeeper was clearing out a tree or something of birds that should be nesting there, and he had a double-barrel shotgun. He went boom, boom, boom. It scared me to death. I've never been that close to a firearm in my life. And I thought, my God, is this what it's like in America? We're just not used to it. We don't have guns. You do have in your country still, and Americans have always said, what is it? Is it the Fourth Amendment, the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms? Which amendment is that?
I think it's the Second Amendment.
I think it's the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. But this is the thing about America, that that it will not be infringed, and yet what have Americans done with their guns except to hurt each other?
Yeah.
Right throughout your history, all they've been used for is hurting each other. You could use them right now to be free. So why don't you have the guts to do it? Because the Berlin Wall came down. It did. Russian communism, Russian totalitarianism, Soviet totalitarianism, it did disappear. And why did it? They couldn't play the game anymore. After Chernobyl, it just became too obvious with that nuclear disaster that they couldn't play the game anymore. The whole world could see that the Soviet Union was a joke. And it was just, hurting its own people. And finally we had Glasnost, and finally the Berlin Wall came down. Just because of the pressure from below, from the people. It gives me hope, Sean. I think it's possible that we could have a peaceful revolution. But until men like yourself and Justin Stellman and all the broadcasters, all the people who've made wonderful movies like Loose Change, until you start getting together and nominating people to take over. I think Justin Stellman would make an excellent president. I've told him so. You're going to have a situation where there are people who are ready and willing to take over and push out the political class that you have. And that will be the only way that you'll ever achieve the freedom that we should have. And like I say, I think it's possible it could be done peacefully. I think it's more likely that someone will have to do something large that shows intent. Because the only thing that the ruling class fear is physical force. George Orwell said this in The Lion and the Unicorn. They can stand moral force until the cows come home. Physical force, they fear. And I do feel that things have reached a point now where the least sign of willingness to use physical force from the entire American population would see your ruling class just flying off and hiding in a bunker somewhere. I really think that's true.
That's an interesting way to think about it. So one thing I do want to touch on, and you touched on it, is how enladen the in all of our systems, like from the judicial system to the military industrial complex, you got the prison industrial complex, all of these, and the financial system, they're all it seems like they run on the same model, and like anytime you need a third party to explain something to you because it's so complex and so, confusing, that's where the fraud is. Like with lawyers, you need a lawyer to get through the judicial system. You need a doctor to tell you this. Because you don't know. You need an insurance broker to explain this. All these middlemen, when you need them to explain something to you, there's fraud in all of that.
It's funny. There was a movie that I saw a few years ago. It really has tied things up for me with something that I learned that I talked about on Ricky's show. It was Matthew Broderick, and it was The Freshman. That's right. I think it was called The Freshman, and he was having his first meeting at university on his first day with his professor. Who is going to do film studies with him, and the first thing this man tells him is you've got to buy these books that on film studies, and he's called Fleber. Says you've got to buy them, and I think and this is a while ago. I think the amount is that he's got to spend is like $1,200 worth of books, and of course Matthew Broderick has to say, "Oh yes, I understand. They're your books." And I thought, oh, so the mighty dollar, the almighty dollar, even manages to corrupt the academic system in the United States, along with everything else. I might as well mention it, that when I was talking to Ricky, Sean, I'm sure you listened to it, recently, because of the internet, because of YouTube, British people are starting to learn a lot more about the reality of America and vice versa. And there was a woman who was interviewed in the street in London, and she was asked, do you know how much it costs to have a baby in the States? And of course, because it costs us absolutely nothing, she was kind of miffed and said, what do you mean? Money to have a baby? It doesn't cost anything to have a baby. And of course, this woman is saying, oh, yeah, we have to to pay. And how much do you think it is? Because she's got no idea. And then the woman says, well, it's about $10,000. 10 grand just to have a baby. And then that shocked me. I didn't realize it was that much. And I brought that up when I was talking to the Truthzillas. And for anybody who I've shocked in that moment, who may not have heard about this before, I brought that up with the lady who's one of the Truthzilla team, and she says, actually no, it's more like $30,000.
Yeah.
And this is what Americans do not realize, Sean, and this is a very serious point. Americans just don't realize that. I think they've all got a figure in their heads, which at the moment I think must be around more than $1 million. I would have thought more like $2 or even $3 million. That they feel they need to have that much money as padding against the world. Should you lose your job? Should you need an operation? If you want to have several babies, a family, big family. Americans seem to have this idea that because you've got to pay for every damn thing,
Mm-hmm.
to go through life protected and go through life able to face anything that life throws at you, you've got to have a mega amount of money. And it can be made, but you've got to make damn sure that the other man pays and pays and pays and pays and pays. And the net effect that it has is to make every American into a whore. I think that every American is a much more susceptible to selling out. I mean, selling out is in itself an American term. You know, people don't use that term in Britain or in Europe. Nobody here you'll ever hear them say, "Oh, you've sold out." You know, it's not even a phrase here, and it's something that I hope that comes out of our conversation and the interviews I've done recently is to make Americans aware that the most important thing that Americans have got to fight for is free healthcare. I mean, it puts you in the bracket of the third world that you don't have free healthcare.
Yeah, no, that was one of the things I was talking about because it's, you know, during this pandemic, my health care is tied to my employment. And when I'm not making money, I'm not covered in my health. My daughter's not covered, and, you know, any of these things. So, so to go along with what you're saying is in selling out, I chose to not forego being a business agent in my local because that's like a democratic system. You have to be elected to that position and all this other stuff. And people were using my past against me. They were, behind the scenes when they were talking, when they were campaigning against me, they were throwing those things out like, oh, you really want to trust somebody who's been to prison? All of these other things that they try to do, which they do on the national scene too. So that really put a bad taste in my mouth. Then the pandemic hit because I was in November of 2019. And then the pandemic hit in March. We got locked down. I started spending more time with my daughter. I have a 3.5-year-old daughter that I co-parent. She's almost 4 now. But I was willing at that point, before that, to sacrifice the time with her to go into this career that would take me away from her, traveling a lot, doing a lot of different things, right? And once I started spending that time with her and realizing how important it is to have me there, and involved in her life and raising her. A lot of the things, here's a really good quote that it stuck with me. It was a meme, but it really stuck with me. It says, instead of giving your kids the life you wish you had, teach them the things you wish you knew. And in order for me to be able to teach her the things that I've come to know and the things that I need to arm her with to go out into life, I have to be there. Yeah. And so in order for me to be there, that means, okay, well, then maybe I'm just going to have to sacrifice something. Maybe I'm going to have to sacrifice making a bunch of money. Maybe I do or maybe I take a risk like I'm doing now and trying to pivot from that into content creation and, all these things that are going along with this. I started a nonprofit organization to try to help out people in my population of formerly incarcerated and, try to make a difference there. It's not 100% selfless because at some point when I get it rolling, I'm going to take a salary, but I'm not going to get rich off of it. I'm going to be doing just enough to keep me, comfortable enough to do the good work that I need to do to impact the people that are around me and in my population and to help try to make the world a better place through whichever way I possibly can.
Good for you.
And so, when you talk about selling out like that, I totally understand. And like, there's no amount of money because I don't care about money anymore. I used to. It used to be something that like I would strive for because I didn't grow up with a lot of money. I didn't grow up poor, but I definitely didn't grow up with everything that I wanted. And in not having, and being in a broken home and all of that, things get skewed, and you don't have people that are teaching you the values and morals of what a good person is, right? That gauge, that spectrum, I didn't have it. And so, by the time I got to, maybe in my 40s, I really started maturing and realizing, like, what does that look like for me, and how do I want to manifest that in my life and make a difference. So yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. Sometimes I go off on, I'm going, and then whew, there you go. He went right. Hey, come on, get back over here.
Well, I think you've made a nice statement there, my friend. You're trying to do the right thing and finding it difficult because you're living in America. And that's my point. It's harder for Americans to be decent people. And that is the way that your system is rigged. And, it'll be difficult for you if you have the power ever to do it because, there are Americans who, because they've been so brainwashed, will always say that, free healthcare, God damn it, we don't want that, communist thing and all this kind of crap. I mean, for God's sake, the whole of what you would call the civilized world has free healthcare, and I've experienced the healthcare in several different countries, like Ireland and Holland and France and whatnot. And I've asked foreign people who I've taught. I've been able to ask the Spanish, the Italians, Romanians, Russians. About what it's really like, where it's really at with healthcare in their own countries, and you always find that the best countries to live in, like Holland and Denmark, because they're kind of, if you really look into this, people tend to agree that they're the most comfortable and safe and civilized places on earth right now. Certainly, I think most people who've lived in Britain and I've known a lot of people who've gone to spend time in Holland. And I've found this is very true of Americans as well, who've moved to the Netherlands. The free healthcare and the standard of free healthcare always seems to walk hand in glove, I've found, with a truly enlightened and progressive and civilized and democratic society. So, this is the thing that the Americans mainly need to aim for.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great point to end this on, unless you have some more that you want to talk about.
No, I think that I think, I'm a little bit embarrassed now that some of the, I think that the interview I did with Ricky Varandas is worth hearing, because we brought up a lot of stuff that was very important at a very important time. I just sometimes look back at my own interviews and wish that I could have, compressed what I said a bit better. But this is why I'm a writer.
Yeah.
You see, because when I'm actually, it's actually a good idea to end it here, because one of the things I've been worried about tonight is that I might wind up saying what I've just been writing, because I actually have had to add quite a lot to my book that's being published soon. That's basically, my movie script that's going to be illustrated. And I didn't plan it that way, but I've had to add quite a lot at the beginning and the end in particular, because of what's gone on with this whole thing with Ghislaine Maxwell and everything else. But I don't think my publisher would be too pleased if I was to say it all, on the air. And with what's going on right now, I do think it's worth having. It's worth reading. I do, want to influence the way that events are going, especially with the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. So I hope my book can do that. So no, I think we've it's about an hour and a half, isn't it? We've been talking.
Yeah, it's about an hour and 40.
No, well, Sean, thank you very much for having me on your show. It's been very pleasant, and I hope you get a lot of views from this. If you get 2,000 views by the end of this weekend, don't forget that will be 200 times more, at least, in reality. Because that is what they always do to me. They always have that kind of reduction. They always underreport the hits by a massive amount. Do you do your own Google Analytics?
I haven't figured out how to do all of that yet.
I didn't bother with that either. I think Google Analytics seems to be a bit of a pain in the neck. But if you can get in touch with Andy, the Raconteur's news people, he might be able to tell you how to do it easily or quickly or whatever. But it is worth knowing. It is worth knowing because that's how you'll be able to tell how well you're doing really. Because I'll never forget the way that Andy said, whenever you're on the show, Mr. Conolly, boy, oh boy, they really raised their game. I'll never forget that. He said he was absolutely astonished what was being done to him as soon as I was his guest. And they're still doing everything they can. Alexander Ravella, this lovely man who he posts things on Facebook just about every day. He put a pirate copy of my movie online, and that's the one I generally direct people to because the public comments below it are really good. And they basically all say the same thing, which is, wow, everybody should see this movie, And I've lost count of how many times I've sent a link to someone or I've recommended it, said, you should see my movie. And then I go and look, and it's just a white background. It's gone again. They've taken that movie down over and over and over and over again. And it's missing at the moment. If anybody watches this and they start looking for the film, it's missing at the moment. They keep suppressing my work, keep trying to hide it, they keep trying to bury it. That, I think, is what has made it endure and made this thing go on as long as it has. So please be aware that, whatever you get in terms of hits, it may be millions of times more than it actually says. Probably will be.
Yeah, for sure. No, I definitely know that's possible. And the funny thing is that the thing that I thought wouldn't get a lot of views at all, the flat earth guy. I had a conversation with him, David Weiss. And within 3 days, I had 1,600 views on my YouTube channel, and that's the most I've ever had on any of them. And I'm like, that's a strange one to get that many views. But whatever. I mean, I don't believe in flat Earth. I don't, I
need to take a break anyway, Sean. So I'll say good night, and hopefully we'll have a chat some other time.
Awesome.
You've been listening to the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast. Sean is a single dad, a union blue-collar guy, and he spent time in federal and state prison for drug trafficking and fraud. When he was released from prison in 2006, all he had was the clothes on his back, a bag of mail, and some paperwork. Since then, he's turned his life around and shares the struggles and successes on this podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we hope you were moved. To connect to the show, book a guest spot. For merch, Patreon, PayPal, and social media links, go to linktr.ee/nowhere to go but up. On Instagram at Nowhere to Go But Up Now. On Twitter at But Up Now. On the YouTube channel at Nowhere to Go But Up Podcast. See you next time.